Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals executive session for April 7th, 2014. We'll begin with the special order calendar. Decision items. Item number 1, 11668BZ and 96067BZ, 36 and 40 Central Park South, Manhattan.
Any questions or issues? They did revise their drawings and put the proper notes. Any concerns?
No.
Okay.
Item number 2, 54682BZ, 14815 89th Avenue, Queens.
We have included a condition in our resolution regarding the barbed wire that would be a restriction, so no barbed wire. Any other concerns? Okay.
Item number 3, 24601BZ, 3511 Prince Street, Queens.
Any issues with this? They provided us with signage calculations for 35th Avenue, 35th Street. Any concerns? Okay.
Item number 4, 36905BZ, 908 Clove Road, Staten Island.
They provided photos of the fence. Commissioner Martinez?
Yes, as long as they keep it under repair.
Okay, good.
Item number 5, 82319BZ, 1901 10th Avenue, Brooklyn.
All right, questions and comments?
They've moved the parking again.
They have moved the parking. This is what I recommend. As you know, the parking is required parking as per the development that's supposed to be as of right. I think I'd feel more comfortable if they don't show us the parking layout and just note that this parking is subject to DOB approval and would provide the required number. And I say this because in the last iteration, the dimensions, I don't believe they work, or they may not really comply with the regulations that are set on the zoning resolution in terms of aisle widths. So ultimately, the amount of development that they can do or enlarge this building would depend on how much parking they can provide. So if that seems reasonable to all the commissioners, if we just ask them to do that.
Yes.
Okay. And similarly, the issue of the curb cut as well, which is unclear whether it's allowed, we can note that that can be looked at by DOB as well. Okay.
New cases, item number 6, 45756BZ, 152 154 India Street, Brooklyn.
This is an extension of term. Questions and comments?
I had a
Yes.
question about the adjoining building that I guess this is an accessory
Okay.
parking to. Could they tell us exactly which building it is? Because
It's unclear.
it is unclear there on DOB's website. The CO, at least for 148, seems to be for a two-family, residence, and that's contradictory to, I guess, their statement, so.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Just, I thought it was the other building on the other side.
So did I, but it's
But,
still a
and then I
residential
think they
building.
should be under common ownership. I believe that
Why
was
do you
one
s-
of the findings of a prior resolution, that the two lots were under common ownership.
Okay. I just wanted them to also clarify that. They've also noted that this is monthly parking for the tenants, and I believe it's a key system, so if they just could confirm that as well. Yes, Commissioner Oakley-Brown.
And I didn't go to the site, but in looking at the photos, there is barbed wire here, and I have a concern about that. And I'm not entirely sure it's necessary if the premises are under 24-hour camera surveillance, which is what the signage says. So if they can just address that issue. And also, the fence from the photos looks like it needs to be refurbished, made nicer, considering it's in a residential neighborhood.
Okay.
In terms of the slats, it looks as if could be spruced up a little.
Okay. Any other questions? All right.
Item number 7, 19296BZ, 1832 1854 86th Street, Brooklyn.
The applicant's asking for the elimination of a term that was imposed by the board of 25 years to allow the conversion of an existing theater to large retail for Marshalls. I know they're asking for the elimination of the term. I would recommend that we ask the applicant to notify the surrounding neighbors within 400 feet. And perhaps if there are any issues, we can find out at the next hearing. Are there questions? Any questions or comments?
Are they releasing to Marshalls, or are they considering another store? And is that the basis for their question of not being able to release at 20, with a 25-year grant?
Oh, you mean to remove, we can ask them to
Yeah.
clarify. I just assumed it was just with Marshalls, but we can ask them to clarify that. Any questions or comments? Yes.
Yes, also on this parking lot, for the employees, you've got barbed wire, and that's also adjacent to a residential neighbor. And that's employee parking, shouldn't even be used after hours. So the question is, what are they trying to protect with that? And is it necessary?
Okay.
Item number 8, oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
Item number 8, 160-00BZ, 244-04 Francis Lewis Boulevard, Queens.
Any questions or comments on this case? They're asking for an extension of term.
I
Yes.
believe they have added vacuums and air pumps along the property line adjacent to the residential. They're not noted on the plans, existing or proposed, and maybe they're planning on removing them. If they could clarify that.
Okay, so that's the existing condition, which is not shown.
Right.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Yes.
The signage on the plan says Sunoco, and this is a Sunoco station, so can they give us a newer set of plans?
Okay.
One other thing is the landscaping is not really there at the rear of the building. It's a grassy area.
Right,
but,
right.
And then there's one strip they're supposed to have where the vacuums are.
Okay.
That should be, spruced up a bit.
Okay.
Item number 9, 24709BZ, 123 East 55th Street, Manhattan.
The applicant's asking for an extension of time to complete construction for Central Synagogue. The board may recall this case. In the record, the applicant has provided us letters that they had sent out to various property owners within the zoning lot. As you know, when the variance was before us, the applicant actually asked us for a waiver for owner's authorization. I think in this particular case, they should do the same thing, which is ask us for a waiver if they cannot get the owner's authorization for all the parcels within the zoning lot. I think the board during the variance process asked the applicant to also notify the other owners on the zoning lot of the next hearing. That will give them the opportunity to submit anything to the record as well. I think the board noted in its resolution last time that the applicant had in good faith reached out to the various parties. The parties were aware of this. They came before the hearing and expressed their concerns, and the board was able to take into consideration all these aspects in its deliberation and approval of the case. Okay? Are there other questions and comments? They're asking for 4 more years. All right.
Item number 10, 14292BZ, 473 541 6th Street, Brooklyn.
This is an application for amendment to, actually to the special permit the board granted for a parking garage for New York Methodist. Why don't we talk about this particular case when we discuss the continued hearing? And we will probably call out both cases at the same time at our public hearing as well.
Appeals calendar, decision items. Item number 11, 12313A, 86 Redford Street, Manhattan.
The applicant has asked for an adjournment. As you know, they're working with the Buildings Department to get the permit reissued.
Item number 12, 15613A, 450 West 31st Street, Manhattan.
Are there any questions on this case? Are we ready to take to decision? Okay, good.
Item number 13, 307 and 308 13A, 96 and 100 Bell Street, Staten Island.
Any issues with this, Commissioner Martinez?
Did they get approval for the revised BPP? The pavement plan?
Did they get the approval for the
Yeah.
pavement plan? That I'm not sure, but I think we can put that as a condition if necessary.
Okay.
Okay? I know that they got some approval from the Parks Department regarding the trees. Okay.
New cases, item number 14, 33 14A, 902 Quentin Road, Brooklyn.
All right. As you know, this is an appeal for Buildings Department's determination on the section within the Ocean Parkway Special District, which is 11311. The text talks about the fact that for community facility buildings, the applicable underlying district bulk regulations of Article 2, Chapter 3 apply. And as a result of that, the Buildings Department says, if you go to the commercial regulations and you look at Section 3411, which is under the community facility rules, it refers you to Article 2, Chapter 3, in terms of its bulk regulations, and shows you what the residential equivalence is, which is, in this particular case, for the C42 district, it is the R6 regulations. I think the interpretation that the Buildings Department has made is, I would say, generally clear. If you look at the regulations, the language actually says, let me see here what it says. The applicable, if you look at 3411, they're talking about applicable residential districts, in which case they show that C42 is the R6 district. The text of 11311 says that the text applies to all districts where the underlying bulk regulations apply. If you look at also the the City Planning Commission report, that also notes that all community facility uses will be limited to the residential bulk regulations of the underlying district. So in this case, it's the C42 district. The underlying bulk regulations for residential is R6, and therefore the community facility FAR is limited to, in this case, as the Buildings Department notes, is 0.78 FAR. I did have a few questions, though, and it has to do with really the legislative intent. The regulations, I think the way the Buildings Department interprets it is fairly clear, and it may not be necessary to go to the legislative intent, but if you look at what's been submitted to the record, it does at least give me some pause and be helpful if both parties speak to it a little bit. When the Ocean Parkway regulations were put in place, and they put this limitation on community facility uses, and it says in all districts, they also gave a provision which allowed those same districts to apply to the City Planning Commission for a certification. Subsequent to that, at some stage, and I'm not sure when, the regulations were changed, which in fact defined 4 exemptions. And they talked about the lower density districts, but they talked also about the suffix districts for R7 and R8, which could use the larger bulk of community facility. And then they talk about the certification which applies to R6 and R7 districts. I'm sorry, the earlier one was the suffix districts for R6 and R7, not R8. So it would be worthwhile to find out what that the commission report had to say about these 4 exceptions, because I think it'll shed some light on how this is applied to commercial districts. So that's one issue that I think both parties can go back and look at. The second is just in terms of how these regulations together work. It seems that if you look at this hierarchy of the residential districts, the commercial districts which have residential use, and then the commercial districts which don't allow residential use, and then the manufacturing districts which don't allow residential use. And you see how this text applies to them. It seems to be the most restrictive district tends to be, in this case, the commercial districts that also allow residential uses. So if you're in a pure residential district, you have the ability, and the out, which allows you to go for a certification to get the higher bulk of community facility. If you're in the commercial or manufacturing district, which has no underlying residential regulations, you have no regulations to apply except for the community facility regulations. And then you have this in-between district, which has the limitation of the bulk for community facility, but doesn't allow you the waiver. And I see that as somewhat of a contradiction. On top of that, if in fact they were building a completely commercial building and didn't have community facility, they would be allowed the higher bulk even within the C42, which is greater than what would be allowed under the residential bulk regulations. So it's just very unclear why there's that contradiction. I wasn't persuaded by the buildings department's analysis of the legislative intent, and I just think that they could perhaps reach out to city planning and try and get some answer to that. Questions and comments, Eileen?
Well, just that city planning denied them this,
The out.
the out, right. So
exemption.
I would think that's their opinion, but it did seem to be a little bit of a logical inconsistency.
Right, okay. Other comments or questions?
So,
All right. Okay.
Zoning calendar, decision items. Item number 1, 62-12BZ, 614-618 Morris Avenue, the Bronx.
Any questions? They provided revised drawings. In fact, they've shown more transparency on the ground floor, so I think that makes the building better.
Item number 2, 77-12BZ, 91 Franklin Avenue, Brooklyn.
Any questions on this? They've provided revised drawings. All right, and we've received all our sign-offs, so we can move to decision.
Item number 3, 303-12BZ, 11106, 11108 Utica Avenue, Brooklyn.
We'll have to defer the decision. We're still waiting for DEP sign-off.
Item number 4, 160-13BZ, 1171, 1175 East 28th Street, Brooklyn.
Are there any concerns? Commissioner Hinkson, I think they responded to your comments?
they did, and I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Item number 5, 177-13BZ, 134 Langham Street, Brooklyn.
Any concerns with this, Commissioner? Okay. Do you want us?
The DOB will review, it's in the resolution, that they'll review the flood regulations for compliance.
Okay, good.
Item number 6, 207-13BZ, 177 Hastings Street, Brooklyn.
All right, any concerns with this? They did bring down their perimeter wall to match the adjacent buildings.
It's fine.
Item number 7, 268-13BZ, 2849 Cropsey Avenue, Brooklyn.
Any concerns with this case for lot coverage? Okay.
Item number 8, 276-13BZ, 1629 First Avenue, Manhattan.
Any issues with this?
Item number 9, 290-13BZ, 2244 Church Avenue, Brooklyn.
Any questions on this case? Okay.
Item number 10, 306-13BZ, 3766 Bedford Avenue, Brooklyn.
Any concerns with this? They provided us-
Lower the height of the
Yes.
turret.
Exactly.
Item number 11, 34-14BZ, 49883BZ, 2131 Highland Boulevard, Staten Island.
All right, any concerns with this? Commissioner Martinez, they provided the bigger buffer area.
Right, and they located the trash receptacle.
Okay, good.
Continued hearing items. Item number 12, 299-12BZ, 40-56 10th Avenue, Manhattan.
The applicant has revised their proposal. They brought down the FAR to 5, and it's now at a height of 185 feet and a total height of 199 feet. I think the proposal is much better, and at least I think I'm very pleased with the direction that the applicants have taken. They also revised their financials, which reflect that now a 5 FAR building works. And I think they in a reasonable manner, incorporated some of the suggestions of the board in looking at the revenues that are generated by this building. Commissioner Otley-Brown?
I agree with you. I mean, it seems like they followed the directions that we gave them. And basically, we agreed that they did have some hardship on this site. And it just seems as if they want to have, use their waivers to build a grade A, Class A office building that is going to have a spectacular design in the hopes that they can maximize their rents and overcome their hardship. And I think that's actually a good idea.
Okay. Other comments? Yes.
Well, just, the opposition, I guess, is arguing about the open spaces on each floor. And I guess that's a new feature.
Right, but I think that the applicant responded to that. They talked about the fact that these open spaces in between the floors actually provides better connections between office space, and that helps to increase their rent. I think in this particular case, you have a building that does have legitimate hardship costs here, and I think in addressing the issue of a minimum variance, they're not asking for any additional FAR. So I think the flexibility of the design to offset these costs seem reasonable. I think the issue was never about height in this district. The applicants provided an alternative in terms of the bulk to show that as a right building, they could get a much taller building and also block off the lot line windows of the adjacent High Line building. I agree with the applicant that lot line windows cannot depend on views and light. An as-of-right building could have blocked these windows. And I think this particular design does two things to me, which I think is advantageous to the High Line building. And one is that they have set back portions of the building by about 16 feet from the lot lines. The views are not protected, but at least it doesn't come completely against it. And also the southern portion of the site, where an as-of-right building could have wrapped around and blocked out more windows, is actually left open. And they're doing this daylight carving on the south side, which I think would also provide more light and air to that building. So I think that this response in terms of the design is, I think, a good response to the site, and also a good and positive way of alleviating their hardship. I just have a comment on the financials that the opposition had put forward. I know they talk a lot about the 4.5 cap rate that they believe that the applicant should aim towards, and in which case an as-of-right development would work. I would just say the 7.5, if they identified as their cap rate, doesn't seem unreasonable to me. I think we've seen a lot of office buildings. It's about the risk. This is a new building. So I don't see that as really, I think that seems like a rational assumption, in my opinion. Commissioner?
I agree. I actually accept the arguments put forth by the financial consultant that this is a new building in an area that really isn't characterized as an office building neighborhood. It's far away from public transportation in the form of subway systems. I think that, you can express that in a higher cap rate.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns on this case? Okay.
Item number 11, 311-12BZ, 964 Dean Street, Brooklyn.
The applicants ask for an adjournment.
Item number 14, 124-13BZ, 95 Grattan Street, Brooklyn.
The applicant has revised their study. I just have a few questions on the study, and I think that it can respond back fairly quickly. I just had a question about some of the vacant sites, because they've identified few, but the way they've shown their map doesn't identify what seems to be vacant sites, and then they can speak to that. I would recommend when they put these study maps together, they should show the zoning districts, they should show the lot lines, and they should show the building footprints. And I think that really helps in the board's ability to read these maps and have all the information necessary to support their uniqueness finding. Questions and comments?
No, that actually was going to be my comment as well. I saw the new map, and I was concerned that there just wasn't enough information, and it wasn't clear exactly which were the vacant lots. So they can make that clearer.
Okay, other comments? Yes.
I just wanted to say that if you do as the applicant asked, and you look at this one lot as apart from the other lot as if it didn't exist, then, what they're saying in the lot survey in terms of this being only one of the 4 lots that are 2,500 square feet or less, you know, and that aren't in common ownership, it's, I'm convinced. However, I have to be honest and say that it still does stick in my side, the fact that it is next door, and while there does seem to have separate ownership, there is definitely potential for this to be merged. And if it is merged and becomes a 5,000 square foot lot, it really is a different ballgame. It would require different arguments to address the uniqueness. And so I'm kind of, I guess, I'm not entirely on board with this.
Okay, I agree. I think it troubles me as well. There's certain facts that they put forward to us which the board can take into consideration. These 2 lots were always separate. They both had residential buildings on them. They were turned in at different points. But I would agree that it's clear that an assemblage is possible and probably have better chances of being assembled than other lots where there is no party that actually has part ownership in both the properties. But I would say that even if you look at this as a 5,000 square foot lot, and you do see other lots that are 5,000 square feet or less in the surrounding area, either under common ownership or assemblage possibilities, I think why this one could possibly be distinguished is because it does have a clear history of residential on the site, and it is also sandwiched between 2 residential buildings that have limited frontage, which is on a narrow street, which further, I think, makes it difficult for them to have feasible manufacturing uses. So I think in some ways the board can accept some of their arguments, and the ones that perhaps we're not completely persuaded by, there may be other arguments that still support that the site is unique and is deserving of a variance. All right. Other questions or comments? Did the board have any concerns about the proposal? Because they're proposing the 4-story buildings, it matches with the streetscape. Any concerns?
I didn't, no. That's reasonable.
Item number 15, 12513BZ, 97 Grattan Street, Brooklyn.
All right, I think our comments are exactly the same. Did you agree? Okay.
Sorry. Item number 16, 16313BZ, 133-10 39th Avenue, Queens.
All right, questions and comments? Commissioner Montanez, I know you had some concerns.
Yeah, they corrected the rear yard issue.
Okay.
Which really didn't affect the construction of the building.
Right.
And they've updated their census data for the parking survey. I did visit the site, and I know they have an on-street parking survey, but I didn't see any of those spaces available. There's supposed to be a minimum of 60, but whatever.
It does seem fairly crowded. I
Yes,
think
it
they
is.
did, I think they noted, though, that the demand at any time was, isn't it like less than, let me see, I've got it here, my notes somewhere.
Minimum of 60 and a maximum of 116 available space.
Right, right. But the demand that's generated by this facility, I think, is like, you know, around 10 spaces or 9 spaces, right? So 10 spaces. Okay. Are there other concerns? All right.
Item number 17, 246-13BZ, 514 49th Street, Brooklyn.
All right. I think their diagrams are very helpful in explaining the limitations of doing an as-of-right enlargement at this location with their program. Yes, Commissioner?
I agree with you that the diagrams were very convincing, but I also felt that the staff from the hospital really clarified their programmatic need, their need to have a separation between these different types of programs, and that in combination with the plans really convinced me that there was a need here to have the expansion on only 2 floors instead of all floors.
Okay. Other comments?
You know, the color coding helped me a great deal to just
Right.
really understand what the program was. So I'm
Okay.
more sympathetic now than I was.
Right, and I think the board had already noted that the FAR waiver is very modest, that they could have come on the special permit, and that the rear yard itself, the waiver seemed fairly modest as well. They also provide an explanation why they cannot enlarge to the other side. It's because of the mechanicals at the lower level. And even if you had to do a two-story enlargement and not a four-story, as they noted, I think you still would have to have really reorganize the space at the lower level, the basement level, in order to make that work. And that would, I think, really constrain them. Okay.
Item number 18, 269 13BZ, 110 West 73rd Street, Manhattan.
All right, questions and comments? Yes.
Well, I was happy with what they gave us in terms of the sound attenuation measures, and the carting company's going to come at 7 a.m. every morning. I think will alleviate some of the issues with the neighbors.
Okay, good. Other questions and comments? All right, they did show the outdoor space. As you know, if we should support this, I would recommend that we make it very clear that that outdoor space is not used for any activity. I think we should also just make sure that there's no signage and outdoor usage also within the residential portion of the site. And I would recommend, because there has been some bad acting on the site, that we put a term of 5 years. And that will allow us to monitor that they fall and are in compliance with the conditions both on the outdoor space as well as the trash pickup.
And they got their LPC.
And they got their LPC sign-off as well.
Item number 19, 289 13BZ, 473 541 6th Street, Brooklyn.
It's the application for New York Methodist. I thought they gave a very full and rigorous response to a series of issues that we had raised, as well as testimony that we heard at the last hearing. They provided, I think some of it's technical, they provided a new DOB objection for the rear yard. As a result of that, they also revised their as-of-right proposal, both in terms of their statement, facts and findings, as well as in their EAS to now analyze the slightly smaller building. I think they provided much more detail on the programmatic needs, both in terms of the drawings and actually showing what spaces are allocated for what institutes and fields of medicine. They provided us with the supporting historical data, which talks about the trends in terms of how this hospital has changed over time and how the ambulatory patient care has become much more critical. They have also looked at lesser alternatives, including the board's recommendation of further cutting back in the contextual districts, which is the R7A and R6B. In their first go-around, they actually set it back to make those areas compliant, but they claimed it didn't work. And more recently, they've come up with a proposal which is to make the area within the R7A completely compliant and within the R6B just much more contextual and compatible with the context. They have a setback now on the fourth floor, and they've also set back their building, the bulk of the building, by 40 feet from the lot line. And I really think that has helped a lot in the design and the potential effects it has on on 5th Street. They also provided us an alternative, which was for the garage, and whether they could build over the garage, at least to the 5 stories, where the garage allows you to expand. And I thought they made a very rational explanation as to why that wouldn't work. I think you have a very unusual site footprint where you can develop. And you have a building that is already a U-shaped, and I think with this wing to the other side on 5th Street is, at least to me, seems an incredibly inefficient building, whether it's one building or it's 2 buildings. It does, I think, cause real problems for where you put the core and how you access the site and make it seamless. And I think what happens is that either you have to build in the R7A and have a different shaped building, or you build in and have that portion in above the garage. But I think it doesn't, in that instant, really lessen the bulk within the R6B. So I know, Commissioner Montanez, you had a lot of concerns
Yes.
about this.
Right, and, I think one of the opposition letters had to do with building over the garage with a rear yard waiver, which, it does give you a big floor plate. And even if it was used for parking and it liberated some of the space in the subcellars to put either mechanicals or some program, I still have a little bit of trouble understanding why they have all these restricted pathways between the two buildings. I can understand the central core and the two wings, but even if it's just support activities or parking, I still feel and in terms of cost, the foundation is there, and do they have another plan for that parcel in the future? It's just a little confusing to me, because I think it would actually save in costs.
Okay. Other comments? I didn't have any issues with this. I thought it was very well argued. But we can ask them to explain that, of course. Yes, any?
No,
Yes.
I found it very informative. It filled out the argument to me as to why it would be difficult to stretch the building out over the garage with the connectivity issues, especially considering you've got so much sterile space, and how would you get over the sterile space, single core and having to go back and forth. I was convinced.
Okay. Other comments on that? All right. They also provided us with the streetscape, which I think was very helpful. I know,
It's
Commissioner.
extremely helpful. I really now have a good sense of exactly how this new structure fits in with the rest of the landscape. And it was very helpful for me to understand. And indeed, I thought this submission was very responsive to the comments that we had. And I think that it's far more generous now to the street. And I think that was very important. So I don't have any more issues at this moment.
All right. They provided us with the traffic study that they provided to the community board. They did look at the existing condition. It was really to analyze the impacts on the school. And I think there are a couple of things that they laid out over there which seemed very sensible to me. One is that really a lot of the traffic is actually on 6th Street and not on 5th Street. They did look at trucks as well. And they talked about the peak periods in terms of traffic on 5th Street and how that dovetails with the peak periods of the school. And it seems that the real issue is in the morning time, and they talked about the fact that the traffic on 5th Street for the ambulatory care center is going to primarily be employees and not really the patients that have a peak that's much later, and in fact have a peak which is not at the time of the peak of the school. I think it'd be helpful for New York Methodist to just outline some of not conditions, but some of the things that they said they would do in order to alleviate traffic. I know they talked about monitors, and if they could just outline how they're planning to do that vis-a-vis, particularly the servicing on 5th Street, given that we have a loading dock over there, and there were concerns raised not only at the last hearing, but also from the PTA regarding traffic and how it'll be mitigated. I'm sure they could come up with a plan. Other issues that the PTA had to do with just making sure that they coordinate with the school on any kind of changes, and I'm sure New York Methodist could easily satisfy that. They also provided us with an EAS that's been revised. There are issues regarding air quality and noise that they're working on, and I think those, my feeling is that those issues will be resolved ultimately, both during the construction period and also afterwards, which was raised by the PDA.
I have some
Yes.
concerns about the construction period.
Okay.
I know there was something in the EAS, but if they could outline, because I think that's going to be a very significant impact on the neighborhood in the near future.
Okay.
And I guess the construction period is over 2 years. So if they could explain how they're going to mitigate those issues.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay.
Item number 20, 29713BZ, 308 Cooper Street, Brooklyn.
The applicant has reduced the FAR. Now it's actually within the R6A. Other questions? Yes, Commissioner?
I had asked them to address the valuation of the outdoor space and the assignment of value to each apartment in the entire building, and they clarified that for me.
Okay, good. Other questions or comments? All right. There are some issues that have to do with hazardous material and air quality. This is adjacent to a Superfund site. I know the EPA is looking at it, and so is DEP. I think it'd be helpful if the applicant tomorrow just gives us an update on where they are on that issue.
Item number 21, 318 13BZ, 74 Grand Street, Manhattan.
We got a response from the applicant. I thought it was very thorough. They did look at a 30-foot rear yard and gave us a financial analysis that shows that it doesn't work. They've discussed why they cannot recapture that some square footage within the existing envelope, both in terms of filling in some of the voids, which would then trigger second means of egress and would in fact take away from some of the rental space, as well as enlarging the building at the top, given that Landmarks has looked at it and really wants to retain this particular height. I think that this site has some constraints on it. It definitely is it's a very small site. We've seen that in other cases as well. But also they've shown that there are particular costs associated with this site that go beyond just its size, but the fact that it has some subsurface conditions as well as construction issues by bringing back this facade. So they identified, I think, approximately $2 million in premium costs. They're asking for 5 FAR. They really would like to maintain that within this envelope, and so they're looking at a rear yard that's 20 feet. They've taken away the balconies, and they've also provided us an analysis of other rear yards in the area and have argued that it's not inconsistent with the context. I would say that in this particular case, I would recommend to the board that maybe 20 feet is appropriate, not only because of some of the constraints on the site and the existing context, but also since each unit is a floor-through, and therefore there's no single unit that is completely dependent on the 20-foot rear yard. All of them have access to the front of the building as well. Questions and comments? All right. One thing I would say is that I know the applicant provided us a lot of resolutions and decisions that the board made. I found some of those really not persuasive. They were in very, very different situations. You had corner lots where rear yards for a residential district would not really be required. You have 10 FAR zones, but those variances were in 10 FAR districts. So if the point was the board has looked at each case individually, I would generally agree that's true. We always do that. However, we have, I think, as a policy level, tried to get the residential buildings to be as close as to comply with the residential bulk regulations. But I think in this case, it seems that it's warranted to give them that relief. Other board members agree? Okay, good.
Second.
Yes.
Go on.
Yes. Yes. We'll do it at the end.
Okay.
Oh, just brought to my attention that while we were looking at New York Methodist, we really didn't discuss the SOC amendment, so why don't we just do that at the end? That was my mistake, I'd forgotten about it, but we can discuss that at the end, so commissioners have an opportunity to discuss the amendment.
New cases, item number 22, 210-13BZ, 43-1250th Street, Queens.
The variance to allow a PCE at the basement level of an existing building that previously was a factory. Questions and comments?
I was wondering if they could, propose a community facility in the basement. They talked about office use. And I was wondering if if they have handicap accessibility to that space. It wasn't clear from the PCE drawings.
Okay. I think also, since you're asking about community facility at the lower level, I think it'd be also helpful if they just explain also what the constraints are of enlarging this building. It's in a district which allows 4 FAR for residential. They've chosen to retain just the 2-story building. And from that perspective, I can understand the change of use at the lower level makes the revenue better, and it actually offsets, it allows that space to be used, but it also offsets any additional bulk that would normally go with the site. But I think they should just speak to that. Other questions? Yes.
Signage. They have a large awning with, I think, signage on 3 sides, which isn't included in their calculations, also a banner.
Yes, okay. On the canopy, that's correct. All right, other comments? Yes,
I understand the argument of the difficulty in having retail be feasible when it's actually partially below grade. And then they talk about the size of the space being too large for one user in terms of office or even local retail. But I would like them to give me some proof about that, if they can do a survey of the neighborhood retail and office spaces to show us what the average size is.
okay. All right, other questions? I think it'd be helpful if the applicant also provides us some photographs of the rear yard where it's adjacent to residential. The situation is on 2 sides adjacent to residential. One portion, they showed that there were no windows on that side, and the type of spaces that the PC occupied were really not the spaces where there was activity taking place. But at the rear, it's, I think, a 10-foot separation between this building and the adjacent building, and I just want to understand what that context is, where the windows are, and if they're providing any attenuation. Yes.
I also just have one question
Sure.
about the financials. There's like a difference of $40,000 in gross income between both scenarios shown, and there's $125,000 more in soft costs for the as-of-right than the proposed, and that's due to the commercial leasing fee of $111,000. But if this is a legalization and both scenarios start from ground zero, wouldn't there be a similar brokerage fee for the proposed as well? And if so, then that actually evens out the equation even more so for the proposed, so if they could just address that.
Okay.
Item number 23, 23313BZ, 2413 Avenue R, Brooklyn.
All right. Questions and comments? Yes.
Just if they could clarify what they're asking for. I think the zoning analysis says 1.01, the statement says 0.95, and they've added a front porch in the front, which takes up most of the front yard, so I don't think they comply with the landscaping.
Okay. Other comments?
I have a question
Yeah.
about, it appears they've got a 5 or a 6 foot difference between the roof rafter and then the ceiling below, and I was just wondering what that space is. Is that, why do they have to have so much space? It just seems excessive.
Okay. All right, we can ask them about that. And also, I think it'd be helpful if they provide us with an envelope drawing, because I'm not sure. It reads as if it's 3 floors, especially from the side elevations, and it all should be fitting within the R32 envelope. Okay.
Item number 24, 302-13BZ, 140 West 23rd Street, Manhattan.
All right, questions and comments on this PCE?
I think
Yes.
it would be helpful if they added some of the noise attenuation measures to the plans.
I think that'd be very helpful. It is a case where you have residential above, and they are proposing this box within a box. We've seen other PCs that have recommended similar sound attenuation, and we should get the notes on the drawing. Okay.
Item number 25, 305-13BZ, 30-50 Whitestone Expressway, Queens.
All right, questions and comments on this case? Yes.
I was just wondering why it took them 11 years to apply for a special permit. I mean, it's a well-known brand, and I think they've come to us before.
They have, for legalizations, I believe, but yes. It has been a very long time, I agree.
And then they have many, many violations, and they really didn't go into a lot of detail. and several of them are related to the PCE.
Okay, we can ask them to speak to that issue. Other comments? Yes.
They're going to put in a handicap ramp in the front, but I was wondering how they have handicap access to the second floor.
Right. I know there's some elevators in the building, but they're not, don't seem to be connected, and I don't know if that is going to be accessible, so we should find out about that. Okay. All right, can you call out?
I'm going to call it again. Item number 10, 14292BZ, 473 541 6th Street, Brooklyn.
All right, this is the amendment to the special permit, which allowed a garage of more than 150 spaces. I think the amendment application, the board was aware that they were going to do in relationship to the larger project for New York Methodist. Are there any questions on this case? I think they've explained the parking itself. As you know, this garage and structure had a certain amount of spaces that was required. They're still providing the required number of spaces, even with the relocation of parking on other portions of the site. And still, I think there's still an additional, I don't know, I feel like saying 150 spaces that are permitted. Are there any concerns about this? Okay, good.
This concludes the executive session for April 7, 2014.